Today's stuff we're going to learn is Yevamot Sadi Bet. I just want to make an announcement for the next few days. There will not be the regular Zoom, but the regular shir will go up as usual. It'll even be up earlier in the morning. So Zoom will go back to normal at 7:15 every morning, Israel time, next Tuesday. Okay. Today's daf is sponsored by Diane Kusher, marking the shloshim today of our beloved husband, father and grandfather Dennis, Shimon Avram Ben Yisrael Moshe. It's harder to believe each day. Today he will be turning 66. Today's daf is also sponsored by Tina and Shalom Lam, with gratitude to Hashem for a new grandson, Nachum B'Tsalem, Mazel Tov to his parents, Shlomit and Ari Lam. Mazel Tov. We're going to get started from the bottom of Sadi Aleph and Bet. I'm just going to review again that we're talking about a few different kinds of cases in the Mishnah, our original Mishnah, where a woman thinks her husband is dead. There's either one witness or there's two witnesses, right? And those have very different ramifications, because if it's only one witness, we assume the woman should have done proper research and didn't, and therefore she's penalized. In the case where she relied on two witnesses, we don't penalize her. But within one witness also, we then start to talk about, well, if the Beit Din took the one witness and said, yes, based on this one witness, we're going to allow you, then you're exempt from bringing a sacrifice. When the Mishnah says al pi Beit Din, it means al pi Beit Din, the Beit Din ruled when there was one witness, okay? And then she's exempt from a korban. But if it's al pi 8, right? If it's, the Mishnah said al pi Beit Din, and then they said, right, im niseit shelo b'reshut was, shelo b'reshut is two witnesses without the court. And then there's if she's b'reshut, which means one witness with the court. Okay, it's two different things. It's a little confusing. So again, there's one witness with the court or two witnesses without the court. Two witnesses without the court, she's right. If it's two witnesses without the court, and then it turns out it was a mistake, she has to bring a sin offering because she didn't rely on the court. But once she relies on the court said, well, we believe one witness, and therefore, right, you can get married. It becomes the responsibility of the court, and she no longer has to bring a korban. Today, we're going to see there's a different opinion about that. But first, we're starting with a different issue, which is very, very interesting, and has ramifications very much so nowadays. Amar Rabashi, ulakala lo cheshina. We don't go by rumors, okay? In other words, if one witness allowed her, and then there's some rumor that the husband's still alive, we don't start looking into it really and opening up a whole thing just based on a rumor, right? If two witnesses come and say he's alive, okay, or he shows up, okay, but not if it's just a rumor. So, hey, Kala, what kind of rumor are we talking about? Or when did this rumor come in? If it's after she, right, there's different stages. She hears he's dead, they permit her, she then goes and gets married. And then all of a sudden we start hearing rumors, the husband's alive. If that's it, Hamar, and Ravashi is saying we don't go by rumors, well, Hamar Ravashi, that can't be what Ravashi means, because he already said that somewhere else. To Amar Ravashi, he said, Kol kala debatar nisuin lo cheshina. This is a very important thing. Once a woman's married, we don't start paying attention to rumors, okay? If somebody comes and tells us, we heard that, blah, 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 you don't start looking into it because the woman's already married. You don't want to mess up someone's life, right, for just a rumor. So we let it go, okay? Mao detema. So now, first of all, this is very relevant. And my husband was with a case recently where someone was married to a convert and someone comes into the court. They wanted to mess him up. I think I told you the story. And they said, he's a Kohen. Hey, I heard he's a Kohen. Now, that's not testimony. That's a rumor, right? There's no real proof that someone's a Kohen or someone's not a Kohen necessarily. So, and the court actually accepted it. Now, in this case, you should have said, and it's a good question, actually said, we were talking about it yesterday, said I have to really look into it. And why did the court open this up again? Seems like very clear from here, we don't go by rumors once someone's already married. We don't want to go messing up their lives, right? The courts here sometimes aren't minded to that issue and do start opening things up. And the question is are they what they're doing halachically legitimate or not, right? Sometimes the courts could be doing things that, even though generally they do follow halacha, but sometimes there's things, again, so we all know there's different opinions and it seems pretty clear from here, though, that we don't go by kolot after nisuin. Anyway, it needs some research as to why the courts here do open things up, even once people are married. Again, maybe there's a distinction between a kol and something that's more than just a rumor, okay? But anyway, if Ravashi already said this chadazimna, then why did he say it again? So they say, well, no, it really is that case. Mao detema ho'il ba'ata lebedina usharinan kikala de kaminisuin dame betitza. Since we needed the court to come and say, we believe this one witness, right? Without the court, we wouldn't believe one witness, right? The court is the ones who told us we can believe one witness. But that means if you need the court to tell you, right? I don't need a court to tell me we believe two witnesses. We know we believe two witnesses on any issue. But generally, we don't believe one witness. The court was the ones who came in here and said, listen, even though maybe we have some doubts about the situation because we don't have two witnesses, we're going to allow this anyway. Maybe that's different than someone who gets married in a halachic way that wouldn't even need a court to tell you it's okay to do this. And therefore, because what it's saying is, even though maybe there's a concern that he's alive, we're going to allow this. Then comes a rumor to say, well, maybe he's really not. Maybe in this case, it will have some value. But comes and tells you, no, the rumor has no value, despite that you might have thought it did. Okay, because by the way, just to point out, apropos the case that Seth, my husband, was telling me about, it says, Kol kala de batar nisun lo chashina. What are we referring to? Rashi says, like a kohen shenasai isha, and then it turns out that she was, a grusha or a zona. His case was the opposite. It was, he married a convert, but they didn't know he was a kohen. And then this person brought a rumor that maybe he's a kohen. Okay? So niseit al pi beitin tetzeh. Now we're moving to that second part of the Mishnah where they start discussing, is she liable to bring a korban or not? Is the sin on her or is the sin on the courts? Now, what kind of sin, right? This was an accidental sin. If you do something unwittingly, you have to bring a sin offering. But there's always, right, this is an issue of who's more responsible. Is it the court's mistake or is it the woman's mistake? So if generally we have a rule, there's something called the Par Hatleim Davar Shel Tzibur. We learn this in Masechet Horayot. It's a very short Masechet. And it's all about we learn it from the Torah, but there's a whole Masechet about it. Since we're learning Gemara, I'm telling you about Masechet. It talks about in the Torah that if the community sins because the court taught something incorrectly, then the court, the community as a whole brings one sin offering, right? Let's say all of us sin doing something the courts told us. We're not liable individually at all. We're liable because of the court. So if the majority of the community follow the court's mistaken ruling, they bring what's called a par ha'elem davar shel tzibur. It's a special korban that you bring. So as individuals, we're not liable. What if individuals did something like the court? So there's actually a machloket about it. We'll see a reference to this machloket. If there's no par ha'elem davar shel tzibur, do we say somebody has to bring a sacrifice, right? Normally, the base opinion is no. In other words, it's the court's responsibility. And since the majority of the people didn't follow it, we don't bring this par ha'elem davar shel tzibur, but the individuals don't bring a korban either because it's not their fault. They did it based on the court. So our Mishnah basically said that if the court ruled, there was one witness and the court ruled she could go get married and she went and got married, it's not her fault. It's the court's fault. There's no par ha'elem davar shel tzibur because it wasn't a communal act. It's just her and her husband. But they're not responsible, even though there's no par ha'elem davar shel tzibur. It doesn't fall on them because it was the court's fault. But Amar ze'erei leita lemanita midetani be'midrasha. The Mishnah doesn't hold because there's a different braita that says something different that we learned in the Beit Midrash. Detani Beit Midrasha, or the braita of the Beit Midrash, seems like some book of Braitot or something, or a set of Braitot. Holu Beitim Sheshak Achama. This is going to be a fascinating story. What we're going to discuss here is this called a mistake of the court because the court ruled incorrectly? Or is this called a mistake in the facts? They just made an error. They thought he was dead and he wasn't dead. It's just an error. That's not the same as the court teaching something incorrectly, right? When we normally talk about a par ha'elem davar shel tzibur, so the court made a mistaken ruling. Where does this fall? Is this a mistaken ruling? And what would be the mistaken ruling? We shouldn't accept Eid Echad. Eid Echad shouldn't be believed because look, there's mistakes that happen. And it was a mistake to have ruled, yes, we can accept one witness and assume that the woman's going to do her research. Because maybe she really doesn't know this. Or maybe, sometimes just something goes wrong. Or is it just we can't believe one witness in normal cases? This case, we haven't just made a mistake. Now, if it's just a mistake, that's not a ruling of the court kind of mistake. And then the woman will be liable. And that's what it says in the Tana's Beit Midrash. They say the following. They give a different example. that's a mistake, and not, right? A mistake is just a mistake. It was an error, a mistake in the reality. So what's the case? And it would be a case where you don't bring the par helem davar shel tzibur, and each individual is liable. Holu beit din sheshak'a chama. It was Shabbat afternoon, and it was a very stormy day, and it was dark out. They didn't have watches in those days and clocks that kept time. They used the sun. They decided, the court said, Shabbat's over. Everyone can go do whatever they want, right? Go do malacha, go do things that are forbidden on Shabbat. And then it turned out the sun had risen. If you remember, we had all these cases in Brachot about, but if they davened already, it was Friday, and they thought it was Shabbat, and they brought in Shabbat, it's Shabbat. Anyway, discussed a lot of ramifications of a case like this. In this case, they permitted malacha, and it was forbidden. We don't call this a mistaken teaching of the court to which the court's responsible. This was just a mistake in the reality, okay? And everybody has to bring, whoever did malacha then would have to bring their own individual sin offering. Rav Nachman says, no, it's a hora'ah. This is a mistake in the ruling, okay? Why? Rav Nachman, tedata hora'ahi. Tibukol Torah kula erecha lo meheman, v'hacha meheman. My time, in other words, this whole thing of accepting one witness is unique. It's a unique halacha that the court decided, right? The rabbis decided we're going to accept one witness, but it's not accepted anywhere else. So the fact that we accepted this one witness and he was wrong, well, that's a mistake. The court decided we were going to accept one witness. They were wrong about it, in this case at least. That's responsibility of the court's decision that was made much earlier, right? And it's based on a mistaken teaching because look what went wrong with this. Now, Amarava, no, this is a mistake. He's now going to bring a comparable example. This part's a little complicated to get. If the court said in chelev or dam that it was mutar, okay, they ruled somehow that chelev and dam were permitted. Those are things that are forbidden by Torah law. And then eventually they realized and they thought about it and they said, oh no, this chelev and dam is forbidden. Now, there's some of the words are missing here in terms of what the commentaries added. But the commentaries add is in the middle, they came up with all their logic and their reasoning, and they realized it was forbidden. And then flippantly, they just said, oh, let's revert back to the original ruling where we thought it was permitted without really having a reason. Now, it doesn't say that here, but that's what they're saying. Now, that would be what we call, right? That's right. We won't accept that last ruling. And that would be just a mistake. But in other words, he's going to say this is a mistake like that. What? If here we have Eid Echad that permitted, and then two witnesses came and said, right, we have one witness that said he died. Then we have two witnesses that come and say, we see him, he's alive. Okay, we saw him somewhere. We obviously accept those two witnesses, right? They override that one witness, just like the chelev, when we decided it was correct, right, that it was forbidden, we overrode. It was obviously a mistake what happened at first, and we basically wipe it out and ignore it. Now, in our case, ki hadar ate erachrina sharina lahu. Now, you wanted to say that what? That it was a mistake in the Horah and we should never have accepted Eid Echad. Well, in this case, if another witness comes along, after two witnesses say we saw him alive, and they say, now we saw him dead, okay? So do we believe them? We do. Now, why? If we say the Horah was wrong, what they taught in the beginning, that you shouldn't have ever accepted one witness, then you shouldn't accept one witness later. But in our case, even though we didn't accept the first witness, we assume that's just because he made a mistake and the court made a mistake by listening to him. But that's just a mistake. It's not a mistake in ruling. Now, when a new witness comes, we're actually going to accept that witness. So that means that this was all a mistake, basically. Okay. In other words, the one witness we didn't accept in the beginning was only because he erred and the court erred by listening to him. But that's just an error in this one off. They were wrong about the reality. Not that it was a mistake in Horah. If it was a mistake in Horah, we wouldn't accept another witness. But we do accept another witness if he later comes after two witnesses. Yes, you're right. He died. He was alive then, but he's dead now. We'll accept that. So from there we see, it was just a mistake. So that's his proof. So we have some siding and saying it's a Horah. It was wrong that we accepted this one witness, at least in this case, right? They don't say we won't accept one witness ever. But in this case, it was a mistake in Hora'ah that we allow one witness thinking that the woman would do her research properly. She actually didn't. And the witness lied or didn't have the facts. But other people say, no, this was purely just an error this time. And it doesn't teach anything about that it's a problem to take one witness. No, that's not a problem. But Af Rabbi Eliezer Saval, Ta'utu, he also holds it's a mistake. Titania Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Yikov Adina Tahal, V'tavish Chatat Shmena. Okay, what I forgot to mention is the big issue here. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning, but I'm going to remind you. If you say it's a mistaken ruling, then the woman is exempt from a korban because it's the court's fault. If you say it was just an error of the aid here and it was an error of the court, then she has to bring the korban. Okay, so ta'ut means korban. That's why we started by saying in the Beit Midrash, they didn't hold like our Mishnah. Because our Mishnah said it's a hora'ah. It's a mistake in the teaching of the court, and therefore she's exempt from a korban if she went by the court. Remember, if she just saw two witnesses, then she wouldn't have to bring a korban. Then she would bring a korban because that was her fault because there was no court involved. But once the court's involved, it's their fault. Then the Beit Midrash said, no, this is just a mistake, which means she has to bring a korban. And Rabbi Eliezer seems to say the same, because what does he say? Yikov Adina Tahal, the ruling will pierce the mountain, which basically means, yes, we had a law, but it's obviously, there's some mistake in the reality here. The aide thought he was dead, and we thought we could believe him, but it can't. So that ruins the mountain that we built. V'tavi chatat shmena, and therefore she has to bring a korban chatat. Now, what does that seem to mean? There's a mistake here. It's a mistake and not an error ruling of the court. Okay, now, those are the two differences. So again, why does she have to bring up? Notice he says a fat chatat, meaning she's really right. She's got to bring that sin offering herself. If you said it was a mistake, that's why she's bringing a korban. But if you say it was the court's fault, she shouldn't have to bring a korban. Now, I did make reference to this earlier on purpose, and now we're going to go back to it. Well, they suggest maybe Dilma Kasava Rabbi Eliezer Yachid She'asa B'Hora'at Beitin Chayav. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer holds that an individual. Remember, I told you a paralem davar shel tzibur is only when number one the court makes an error in judge, ruling on a case. Number two, the majority of the community follows them. In our case, we don't have the majority. So what happens if the majority doesn't follow? Most people think the individual doesn't bring, and the rabbis don't bring, the court doesn't bring either, right? The community doesn't have to bring. But Rabbi Eliezer maybe holds by the opinion that says that when there's no paralem davar shel tzibur, even though it was a hora'ah, and it should have been paralem davar shel tzibur, since the majority didn't follow the ruling because it didn't relate to the majority of the people, and this was an individual thing, in that case, the individual has to bring it, even though it's hora'ah and not ta'ut. Okay? So maybe we don't necessarily have to assume that that's what he means. But they say, no, in kema yikov adina tahal. When he says yikov adina tahal, he seems to be saying there was a huge mistake here because the thing pierced the mountain, meaning there was some error somewhere along the way, but this wasn't an error in judgment, in ruling. It was just a mistake here. That's how they understand. Again, in that language is a little bit unclear what it means. They think it means that it was just a total mistake. And you can't say that Rabbi Eliezer holds by that opinion in Horayot that Yachid She'asa B'Hora'at Beitin, he would have to bring his own korban. Now the Mishnah had said, if you remember, if the Beitin told her that she could get married based on one witness, but instead of getting married, she goes and killa. We'll try to translate literally. She ruins the situation, okay, which we don't know yet what that is. We kind of explained it one way, but we're going to see there's two ways to explain that statement. Then she has to bring a korban. If she gets married and it turns out her husband was alive, she doesn't have to bring a korban. But if she, right, again, we just saw maybe there's a machloket about that, but our Mishnah said no. But if she went and did something wrong, then she would have to bring a korban. So what's kilkala? My kilkala. She went and slept around with all sorts of men, right, out of marriage. So that's what it means kilkala, because remember it said in the Mishnah, lo itirua ele dinaseh. They only permitted her to get married, not to go sleep around with people. What we mean by kilkala is she went into a forbidden marriage. She did get married. We're not talking about that she slept around. That wouldn't bother us. We'll see in a minute. But we're talking about someone who does something by Torah law that's forbidden, like marrying someone you can't marry, right? Like a divorcee to a Kohen Gadol. If you say it's Almana L'Kohen Gadol, you wouldn't say Zinta. Why? Because remember, an issue for an unmarried woman to sleep with someone is not as bad as a married woman sleeping with someone or a grusha and a kohen. Those are much more severe. So that's why those are severe more. Those who say that wouldn't necessarily say the woman who sleeps around. My time, she would say, look, you made me into a pnuya, and a pnuya, again, you're not supposed to sleep with men out of marriage, but it's not as severe as, right? Usually the Torah talks about an eshet ish, or forbidden marriages of arayot, things like that, or kohanim, but this is not as serious. Tanya Kavatei Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're going to prove, like Rabbi Yochanan, that we're talking about an Almana L'Kohen Gadol, a type of forbidden marriage. And there's going to be a machloket in this Mishnah, which is a totally different, or in this Braita, sorry. It's a different issue that they're having a debate about, but within it, you see our case, which is, you have the exact same language, and what does it say now? Kigon, like for example, Almana L'Kohen Gadol, Ugrusha v'chalutza L'Kohen Idiot. So there you have it. It's Kohen, forbidden marriage. It's not talking about an unmarried woman who sleeps around. Now we're going to get into a totally different machloket because we brought up this Braita. The question is, every time she sleeps with this man who she's forbidden to, does she have to bring a separate korban chatat for each time? This sounds like melachot of Shabbat, right? You do a lot of melachot behelem echad, and you didn't know you were forbidden all those things. So do you have to bring separate korbanot or just one? So here it says, chayevet b'korban al kol bi'al bi'ah. Every time she sleeps with him, she has to bring another korban chatat on that. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Chachamim omrim korban echad al hakol. No, she brings one sacrifice for the fact that she ended up in a relationship with a Kohen Gadol. Let's say she was an almanah, for example. Umodim chachamim Rabbi Eliezer. However, they do agree with him. She'im niset l'chamisha b'nei adam. Let's say she was a divorcee and she married 5 different Kohanim, right? She married one, she got divorced. She married another, she got divorced, or he died, or whatever it is. She married 5 Kohanim. Then clearly, each marriage she's basically obligated to bring. Right? Al kol echad ve'echad on each one. Ho'il ugufin muchlakim. This is a topic we talked about. We talked about separate chatarot. Right? They're separate bodies. There are different people involved in the sin here. It's her and some other man, her and a different man, her and a third man. Each time it's somebody else involved, and therefore she'd have to bring a separate sin offering on each one. Mishnah. Obviously, each man would have to bring also. That's not even a question, right? It's just, does she need? She did the same thing 5 times. Mishnah. Haisha. Okay, now let's pull up the presentation for today. We're going to see all the cases of the Mishnah presented nicely here, and it will help us to understand. So here goes our case. Okay. Haisha shalach ba'ala ubina lemedinat hayam. Okay, instead of just the man going, the man and the son go. Okay, so Yael is married to Reuven. They have a son, David, and David and Reuven go off to Medinat Hayam. They go abroad. Uba'u va'amru la met ba'alech. So what do? They say, listen, your husband died and your son died, but your husband died first. Okay, this is all one quote. Okay, I showed it here in 2 stages, so you get the stages. They told her, on Sunday, your husband died, and on Monday, your son died. Okay, they were in some terrible accident. The son lived for a little bit longer and then died. Now, is she obligated in Yibum? No, because the son was alive at the death of the father. So what does she do? She says, okay, based on the testimony that they're both dead, I am clearly exempt from Yibum. So, Niset, she goes and marries Moshe. Oh, and then she has a son. Okay, they don't say that in the Mishnah, but we'll see later the son appears. While she's thinking that they're dead, she has a son. And they are dead, but it turns out your son was the one who died first, and your husband died second, which means that when your husband died, he died childless, and you're obligated in Yibum. And what did you do, though? You married somebody else. Teitzei, she has to get divorced from Moshe. Now, if after she finds out who's who, she has another son, we're now going to talk about the status of both those children. So, Teitzei, she has to get divorced from Moshe. She can't stay married to him. And Havlad Rishon v'Acharon Mamzer. Both their children are mamzerim because she all along was supposed to do Yibum and she hasn't done Yibum. So both sons have the same status. It doesn't matter if the son was born before she found out the truth, where she was accidental about the whole thing, unwitting, or after, and she just doesn't divorce Moshe and take care of Yibum, and then has another child, obviously that kid's going to be a mamzer. Okay, now I say obviously, we're going to have to see. Wait a minute. What's her Isser? What did she do wrong? She didn't do Yibum, right? And instead married someone who she's not, right? She's not allowed to be Lo Tieh Eshet Hamet, the wife of the dead person. Lo Tieh Eshet Hamet Chutza Leish Zar. She can't be with an Ish Zar. That's what we call a Chayve Lavi. Now, only Rabbi Akiva holds, and we're going to get back to this, that there's a mamzer from Chayve Lavi. So this is going to have to go only by Rabbi Akiva. That's what the Gemara is going to say, because if it wasn't Rabbi Akiva, the kid wouldn't be a mamzer because it's only Chayve Lavi. So we'll get to that later. Second case. Amru la meit b'nech. Okay, so now we have the same case, just the reverse. Her husband, Reuven and David, go abroad. Reuven has a brother, Shimon. We'll get to that. So they tell her, your son died, and then your husband died. They're both dead, but the son died first, predeceased the husband, which means she's obligated in Yibum. So what does she do? She says, oh, I need to do Yibum. So she goes and marries Shimon. She does Yibum with Shimon, perfect, nityabma, but not perfect because you can already see where this is going. In the meantime, she has a child with Shimon, Shaul, and then they tell her, oh, by the way, it was the reverse. Really, they're really dead, but your husband died first and your son died second, which means you weren't obligated in Yibum. Now, what's the problem? Well, she married her husband's brother, which is forbidden karet. There, everybody holds the kids are going to be mamzerim, and obviously, Teitzei, she has to get divorced from Shimon, and havla rishon b'acharon mamzer. She needs a get, and the children are mamzerim. Okay, now, amrula meit ba'alech. Next case, they say your husband died. Vini said so. Again, Reuven goes abroad. Yael hears that he's dead. She goes and marries someone else, not having to do with Yibum at all, right? Let's just assume they had kids. And then hamrula kayam hayav amet. Okay, so basically she gets married, has a child, and then they tell her, wait a minute, you married Moshe thinking he was dead. Guess what? He wasn't dead then. When you married Moshe, he was still alive, but vamet, but he did die. Okay, meaning they come right now and they say, listen, at that point, he wasn't dead, but now he's dead. Okay, so now her marriage to Moshe right now is okay, but it wasn't okay in the beginning. Teitzei v'havla rishon mamzer v'acharon eino mamzer. Now we're going to distinguish between the children. Okay, Moshe and Yael need to get divorced because they were married in a forbidden manner, right? She was an Eshet Ish. If an Eshet Ish sleeps with somebody else, she's asur labal, asur laboel. She can't be with the one that she had a relationship with. But since right at this present time, she's no longer an Eshet Ish, so when she continues to stay married to him and has a child after she finds out her husband is actually dead, that child is not a mamzer. Now, the commentaries claim that he is a mamzer midrabanan because by rabbinic law, she's supposed to get divorced from Moshe because we penalized her, and therefore the second child is a mamzer, but only like a suffix mamzer or a drabanan mamzer, not a doraita. And this Mishnah seems to be talking about on the Torah level. Next case. Okay, so now here's a basic case where he goes off. She gets married to somebody else, but instead of getting married, she only gets betrothed. It's a big difference. Why? Because you're not actually sleeping together yet. Now, remember, because it's only when you sleep with someone when you're an Eshet Ish that asur labal, asur laboel. So therefore, if in the end her husband comes back on the scene, she is muteret lachzor lo, okay? So she gets betrothed to Moshe. Then achar kach ba ba'ala, Reuven comes back. Yael is muteret lachzor lo. She's permitted to go back to Reuven because, right, we basically can somewhat ignore the fact that she was betrothed to Moshe because she wasn't really, right, nothing ever transpired between them. Afal pi shenatan la'acharon get. Now we have a different halacha, which is if for whatever reason, now he doesn't need to give her a get, this Moshe. Why? Because the betrothal was ein kiddushin tofsim. She was a married woman. If a married woman gets into a relationship with another man for the purposes of marriage, ein kiddushin tofsim, there is no marriage. So you don't need a get to undo an invalid marriage. But if for whatever reason he gave her a get, lo psalam in a kiuna, she won't be disqualified for marrying a Kohen, meaning she's so not divorced. In other words, she wasn't married and betrothed him in the first place. Therefore, she didn't need a divorce. Therefore, if he gave her a get, the get is meaningless, and she can even marry a Kohen. She's not considered a grusha at all. At Zo Darash, the Mishnah finishes with at Zo Darash, Rabbi Elazar ben Matya, Isha grusha meisha. It says a Kohen can't marry a woman who is divorced from her husband, below meisha eno isha, and not from a man who's not her husband. Okay, I just want to be clear because I see you're asking what about her first husband. We just said she can be married to her first husband. Muteret lachzor lo. Okay, she can be married to her first husband. It's not a problem. Okay, so she stays married to her first husband to the extent that she doesn't even need a get from the second husband, who's not yet her husband, but she was betrothed to him. That betrothal is invalid. She doesn't mean anything. So now she can marry a Kohen. Yes. That's what you're saying. Only if her husband dies. Okay, if her husband dies, she can go marry a Kohen. This means down the road. She doesn't have a status of grusha on her. Okay, if her first husband decides to divorce her, then we'd be in trouble. She wouldn't marry a Kohen. But assuming her first husband dies, then she'd be able to marry a Kohen. So the Gemara starts off and says, "My Rishonu, my Acharon." What's this first son, second son? Now they're going to already explain what I already explained to you. The first one was born before Sheared, her husband, was alive. And the second one was born after Sheared, her husband, was alive. Should have just said the Vlad is mamzer because in the first two cases, there's no difference, first or second. It doesn't matter before or after. Just should have said the Vlad is a mamzer. So they say, Mishum de Kabbalah mitne seifa, therefore, in other words, they brought up the second son. In the first two cases, there's absolutely no difference. They only brought it up because in the third case, there's already a distinction between the one before and the one after, because at this point, the husband is actually dead, and therefore their status will be different. So that's why it brought them both up in the beginning, even though there really was no relevance to it. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we get to this whole idea about her kiddushin tofsim in the Yavama case or not, a woman who's supposed to marry the Yavam and instead marries someone else. We said the kid's going to be a mamzer if she went and married someone else instead of the Yavam, if it turns out the son really had died first. So Tanu Rabbanan, there's a braita about her Mishnah, Zo Divrei Rabbi Akiva. As I told you before, the Vlad mamzer only according to Rabbi Akiva. Shaya Omil, En Kiddushin Tovsim B'chai Be'lavim, because he said En Kiddushin Tovsim B'chai Be'lavim, and basically said, therefore, the Vlad is a mamzer. Those two go hand in hand. Aval Chachamim Obrim, En Mamzer Yavama. The rabbis say, though, there is no mamzer if a Yavama marries someone else instead of her Yavam. That's just a Chai Be'lavim, there's no mamzerim. And that's not our Mishnah. To which the Gemara says, why does this braita say, Chachamim say, En Mamzer Yavama? It should have said, what do the rabbis hold? It should have said the whole broader category. Why did it specifically say this case? So they say, it must be Haitana Hachtana de Rabbi Akiva who Ta'amal, Mechavelavim Dishael, Have Mamzer, Mechavelavim Greda, Lo Have Mamzer. We've seen this before. There's a machloka within Rabbi Akiva. Does Rabbi Akiva hold all Chavelavim or Mamzerim? Or does he only hold ones that are relationship ones that are forbidden to you because because it's a relative? Like, for example, we always bring Anusat Aviv. Someone his father slept with out of marriage. If he sleeps with them, that's Chayve Lavin. So that would be a mamzer according to Rabbi Akiva. But, for example, our case, the Yavama would not be, because she's not related to the person she slept with. He's an Ish Zal, right? That's just a regular Chayve Lavin, not one of She'el, which has to do with relatives. So what they're saying here is when it says this is Rabbi Akiva, but the Chachamim say Ein Mamzer Mi Yavama, what they're saying here is it's not the Chachamim. Chachamim in general, the rabbi's opinion is there's Ein Chayve Mamzerim at all, the Ein Mamzerim from Chayve Lavim at all. This one who said just by Yavama is disagreeing about what Rabbi Akiva himself holds. There's two opinions of Rabbi Akiva here. One is quoted as Rabbi Akiva and one is quoted in the name of the rabbis. It's the rabbi's understanding of Rabbi Akiva that differs from the other understanding of Rabbi Akiva. Basically, it means it's bright is showing two different opinions of Rabbi Akiva about whether there's mamzerim specifically for Yavama, even for Yavama, or for Yavama there isn't, only for a Chayve Lavim they have a relative. Okay, either which way, our Mishnah only holds by the first opinion of Rabbi Akiva that there is mamzer for all Chayve Lavim, and that would be our Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Minayin she'en kiddushin tofsim b'Yavama. Okay, now within the rabbis, we're going to also have a debate within is Kiddushin Tofsim in a woman who marries someone else instead of the Abam? Again, we can go bring up the case and show which case we're referring to here. Right? It was the earlier case where she thinks, I think it's the first case of the Mishnah. Let's just go back. Okay. So she thinks, right, she heard that Reuven died first. Her husband died first and she had a son. And she went and married Moshe. So the question is Kiddushin Tofsim here or not? Okay. Now, even the rabbis who think that generally when it comes to Chai Ve'Lavin, Kiddushin or Tofsim, it would be a valid marriage. Maybe in this case, they think not. And why? Now, the big ramification is our Mishnah clearly held, right, that Kiddushin or Tofsim because she needs a get. Okay. But you wouldn't need a get if in Kiddushin Tofsim. Okay. Which actually is a little tricky because truth is she doesn't really need a get because it's a chumrah, because Rabbi Akiva would hold in Kiddushin Tofsim, she wouldn't need a get. So the truth is it's not a good nafkamina. But anyway, Rav says, Minayin she'en Kiddushin Tofsim b'Yavama. Shenema, there's a special drasha here, and Rav says, it says, Lo tihiyeh eshat hamet hachutza liishsar. That's what we learned, that she wasn't allowed to have married Moshe here. Lo tihiyeh, why the lashon lo tihiyeh? Tihiyeh is lashon havaya, we call it, which means like effective marriage. And it says lo tihiyeh, which means there is no havaya, which means lo teheva havaya lezal. This is not a case of havaya lezal. She is not really married to Moshe. Ushmuel amal ba'aniyutenu tzricha get. And here's why we see, I said before, right? Even right, Rabbi Akiva wouldn't hold she needs a get, and Rav wouldn't hold she needs a get. But why does she need a get in this case? Shmuel comes and says, listen, we're not really sure if she needs a get or not. Why? Misapta leila Shmuel, hi lo tia eshet hamet ilelav hudata, idelo tafse ba kiddushin hudata. By the way, aniyutenu is like, but with our humility. In other words, we're not sure of anything. Because we're not sure of anything, we should be strict and make him give her a get. Why are we not sure? Maybe lo tieh eshet hamet achutza liishsar. It's just a simple reading. She is not allowed to marry him. It doesn't have anything to do with whether Kiddushin or Tofsim or not. Or maybe Rav is right. The lo tieh means even if she does, there is no havaya. Yes, of course, Rav thinks it's forbidden. But it also means that there is no effective marriage between them. But Shmuel says, since we're not sure, we should have him give her a get. Okay. And now this, by the way, doesn't only relate to our case in the Mishnah. It relates to any case of a woman who on purpose went and married someone else instead of the Abam. The debate between Rav and Shmuel is, does she need a get or does she not need a get? Is this a valid marriage or is it not a valid marriage? Does she just do chalitza or even with the Abam? And right, because without doing anything with the other guy, because she really was never effectively married to him. Shmuel says, no, she needs a get first, then she could do chalitza or yibum. Okay, so now comes Rav Meri. So who do we hold? Like, Amar le Rav Meri bar Rachel, le Rav Ashi. Hachi Amar Meimar. Okay, he says that. He says to Rav Ashi, Rav Meri says, this is what a Meimar says, halacha kavatei de Shmuel. Pascal like Shmuel, we make him give her a get. Amar Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi now comes along and says something crazy. And the Gemara is going to say, you're crazy, and they're going to reinterpret it. He says, now normally in our case, what do? She thought, right, mistakenly, we penalized her and she can't stay married to Moshe. She has to get, right, according to our Mishnah, she needs a get. And then she can go and do Yibum with Shimon, the brother of Reuven, her husband. Well, comes Rav Ashi and says, and she needs to get a get from Moshe. If the Abam, Shimon, was a Kohen, her husband was a Kohen, Reuven, Shimon, the brother's a Kohen. Once Moshe gives her a divorce, she won't be able to do Yibum with him because it's a forbidden marriage. So what do we do instead? We tell Shimon, give her chalitza. At that point, she'll be allowed to stay married to Moshe, okay? Even though we're supposed to penalize her, in this case, we're not going to penalize her because she can't do Yibum anyway right now, because the law says she needs a get, and that law is going to preclude her from being able to do Yibum. So we just say, do chalitza and let her stay married to Moshe. To which the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Idgule itagav? We're going to reward them now? In other words, the whole idea here is we're penalizing them for not doing their research properly. And now you're going to reward this woman and reward her husband Moshe, and they're going to get to stay married in this case, just because we hold like Shmuel that you need a get, and she happens to be lucky that her Yabam was a Kohen. We're going to all of a sudden reward her? No way, no how. Someone who sinned is going to get rewarded. Now, it's a little hard to call her a sinner, okay? But again, that was the approach of the rabbis was she did something wrong, maybe not a real sinner, but she should have researched properly and didn't research enough to find out that really her son had died first. And obviously, because in the end, we find out that her son did die first, there must have been a way she could have found out. So what he really means to say is, what he was really coming to say is, this is what's supposed to happen. Presuming that he's a Yisrael, we'd have an issue if he's a Kohen, but presuming he's a Yisrael, Moshe gives her the get, right? That was our case. Remember, let's see it in the picture. Moshe gives Yael a get, as we said in the Mishnah. She needs a get. And then she does Yibum with Reuven's brother. Okay? Very simply. Okay, so that's the situation. Amarav Gidal Amarav Chia Bar Yosef Amarav Yivama Kiddushin Einla Nisuin Yeshba. This is a very strange statement, and the Gemara is going to struggle to understand it. Rav, they say in the name of Rav, remember Rav said, in Kiddushin Tovsim, with the Yavama who goes and marries, right? This woman who went and married David, or whoever, or Moshe she married, sorry, I got confused by the names. She goes and marries David. She doesn't have Kiddushin. The Kiddushin is not valid, but the marriage is valid. That's a little bit strange. What do you mean? Kiddushin Eimba, Nisuin Eimba. If the betrothal is not valid, also the marriage isn't valid, what are you talking about? So we're going to have three interpretations. Eima, Kiddushin Vinisuin Eimba. It was a mistake. What he immediately meant said there's no Kiddushin, and even if they go ahead and get married, there's no validity to that marriage. Ibai Tema, my Nisuin Yeshba, Biznut. What does it mean, Nisuin Yeshba? It means if she was with another man, not in a marriage, we'll see in a minute. Kid Rav Hamnuna, what does he mean? Remember a woman who's a married woman and goes and sleeps with someone, she's forbidden to her husband and she's forbidden to the person who she slept with. What if she's a Shomeret Yabam? She's not an Eshet Ish exactly, but she's also not an Eshet Ish because she's supposed to do Yibum. So according to Rav Hamnuna, if she goes and has a relationship with another man, a sexual encounter, she now is forbidden to do Yibum. That's what he meant by Nisuin Yeshla, meaning not Nisuin, but Znut Yeshla. We're going to consider that significant that now she can't actually do Yibum. It's going to preclude her from filling the mitzvah of Yibum. V'ibait ema lo'olam kidamrina mikara kiddushin emba nisuin yeshba. Maybe we do treat it as if there's nisuin. And what does this mean? And this explains why, when I said before, it's a little confusing. Why does she need to get if ein kiddushin tofsim? As we're going to say, normally a woman who goes and marries, let's say Yael marries Moshe, forget about that he was abroad or anything else. She marries Moshe without taking care of Yibum. We're going to require her to get a get. Why? Because if we had a case like our case where her husband was in Medinat Hayam, we'd require her to get a get. Why? Because the penalty that the rabbis put on her that she's going to need to get a get. Therefore, since you might confuse the cases, we're going to make her always get a get, even though generally Kiddushin aren't tofsim. If she was actually married to him, we're going to require a get. Amar Rabbi Yana. Apparently, this issue was a big issue. Is Kiddushin tofsim in a Yavama who marries someone else instead of her Yavam or not? It's clearly, sikuotam, as we say. It was an issue, right? They kept dealing with it. So Rabbi Yana says, he's an Emorah in Israel. The rabbis got together and ruled, ain't Kiddushin tofsim in a Yavama case. Okay, there's no valid Kiddushin, meaning she wouldn't need a get. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi, lo mishnatenu. We say, we can't learn this from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah doesn't mean our Mishnah here. It means our Mishnah, our book of Mishnayot. Don't we learn it from there? Ditnan. You'll be betrothed to me after I convert, or after you convert, or after I become freed. He was a Canaanite slave, or after you become freed, because the woman was a shivcha Knani. Or after your husband dies. Right now, I can't marry you, but when your husband dies, you'll be betrothed to me. Or after your sister dies, because a man can't marry a woman and her sister unless her sister's dead. The woman he was married to was her sister. And this is the key for us. Or after you get chalitza done. Okay, now. All those cases, ain't a mekudesh. There's no kiddushin. Why is there no kiddushin? Because we say ain't kiddushin tofsim. Now, why? This is what we call, it's got two things going on. You would have to say, number one, he can't do this action now. If he did this action, it wouldn't be valid. That means ain't kiddushin tofsim. Since the action can't be done right now, Therefore, it's what we call, he's trying to do a kinyan on davar shelo bala olam. It's something that's non-existent. Because if he did it now, it wouldn't be valid. It's something that's non-existent yet. So therefore, it's not valid. So according to this, what do you see? It obviously is ein kiddushin tofsim. So comes Rabbi Yochanan and said, we could just learn it from our Mishnah. Why are you doing a vote when it's clear from the Mishnah? So Amrale ilav dedale lachaspa mim mishkacha marganita tute. If I hadn't pulled up the shard, you wouldn't have found the earthenware shard. You wouldn't have found the pearl underneath. You want to know about pearls and shards? You can read about in Flashback this week all about that. I'm going to leave that to Shuli Mishkin, but what he's basically saying is you wouldn't have necessarily understood the Mishnah that way, because you could have thought that maybe Kiddushin or Tovsim, but you still can't do it right now, right? Because she's not free. And that's why it's Davar Shelo Bala Olam. Amarle Rish Lakish says, I don't understand the Mishnah at all the way you did. If Rabbi Yanai hadn't praised you for your reading of the Mishnah, then what Rabbi Yanai was saying is, you could have read the Mishnah otherwise, but I revealed to you, because I said what I said, you then read the Mishnah the way you read it, but you wouldn't have necessarily read it. Comes to Lakish, it says, if Rabbi Yanai hadn't praised his reading of the Mishnah, I would have read the Mishnah totally differently. I would have said something else entirely. I would have said that Mishnah, all is premised on in Kiddushin Tovsim. Why? Not because everybody holds that way, because it's Rabbi Akiva, the famous, we know already he holds. And then we just push that Mishnah aside and say, we don't hold like it because it's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. We don't hold like Rabbi Akiva. So the Gemara said, they say back to him, what are you talking about? Rabbi Akiva, this is based on two principles. In Kiddushin Tovsim, and then Ein Adam Makneh Davar Shelo Bala Olam. Can't acquire something that's non-existent. What we're going to learn is that Rabbi Akiva holds you can Makneh Davar Shelo Bala Olam. There's a debate about it. Can you acquire something that's not yet in existence? Rabbi Akiva, in fact, says you can. So even if he holds in Kiddushin Tovsim, he actually would allow these cases because he has no problem with somebody acquiring something that's non-existent. So I'll just read that inside and we'll stop here. Tomorrow's daf is all about this fascinating topic of Adam Makneh Davar Shelo Bala Olam, or doesn't. Can he or not? Can a person acquire something that's not yet in existence? So Rabbi Akiva ki amar la lachar she'achlotz l'chivimech litzvasei ba kiddushin. The kiddushin should work in this case. Why? To hashamin alei, right after you get chalitza, you'll be betrothed to me immediately. Even though right now he can't do chalitza, it doesn't matter because to hashamin alei Rabbi Akiva da'amal adam makneh davar shelo bala olam. We've heard that Rabbi Akiva holds that one can acquire something that's not yet in existence. So even though right now kiddushin wouldn't be tofes, it doesn't matter. You could still acquire her right now and say, in the event, right, when this happens, you'll be mine. Okay, stop here. And there's a fascinating sugya, this Adam Makneh Davar Shelo Bala Olam, and we'll learn about it tomorrow. Again, there's no Zoom for till next Tuesday, but there will be regular classes up online as usual. Have a great day, everyone.